एकम अक्षरम हृदि निरंतरम भासते स्वयं लिख्यते कथम्। हृदय कुहर मध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति। हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वता मज्जता अवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। देहं मृण्मयवत् जडात्मकम् त्वहं बुद्धिर्न तस्यास्त्यतो नाहं तत्तभावशुक्तिसमये सिद्धात्मसद्भावतः। ओहं भावयुत कुतो वरधिया दृष्टात्मनिष्टात्मना सोहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं। सोहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं। Namo Ramana. In this, our Thursday satsang from Ramana Maharshi Center for Learning, as usual, we'll be referring to the work Guruvachaka Kovai by Muruganar Swamigal. We'll be reading 2 verses from it. Each verse reading will be followed by a short meditation on its meaning, and that shall be followed by a practice session of self-inquiry, which will be of 10 minutes duration. After these 2 segments of verse reading, meditation on meaning, and the practice are completed, there will be a summing up by our president, Dr. Sharadaka, and that will be followed by an offering of Sri Ramanastotram. The chanting will be by Vaibhavji and Pratnama, and the floral offering shall be by Manjunathji from here. We begin this evening's satsang by taking the first verse, verse number 365. 365 selected for us. This appears in the segment Investigation into Truth, which is first of the three segments: investigation, meditation, and experience of the truth. Of course, there is a short preface or introductory verses are there. Leaving that, there are three segments, and this verse 365 is found in investigation into truth, and the sub-segment is the shining forth of the self. The shining forth of the self. Verse 365. It is followed by some notes. So we start the verse reading. Suffering the pangs of death on the cross, that is the insentient body, Christ, that body's ego, suffers agonies as nails are driven in, and in this condition gives up his life. That which remains is the self, the permanently abiding reality, free from the misery of birth and death. This realization of the self, shining as holy God, is Christ's redemption and resurrection. I will go through the notes, then we'll come back to the verse. The Master gave the true significance of Christian faith thus. This is from Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi, talk number 86. Christ is the ego. The cross is the body. When the ego is crucified and it perishes, what survives is the absolute being, God. I and my Father are one. And this glorious survival is called resurrection. Murugana suffers agonies refers to the performance of tapas in the face of severe ordeals. There is a Tirukural quote, just as gold shines brightly when heated to a great temperature, suffering, as it hotly burns, lends radiance to the souls, those who perform austerities. Give up his life refers to the death of the ego, the Chit-Jada Granthi knot. Resurrection refers to the birth in one's source Brahman. By inquiring with inward attention, what is my source? Only one who is born in this way is twice born, Dvijan, Brahmin, Bhagavan. Who is born? It is only he who asks, whence am I born? That is truly born in the Brahman, the prime source. He indeed is born eternally. He, the Lord of Saints, is ever new. This is verse number 11 from Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham. So we go back to the verse. Suffering the pangs of death on the cross, that is the insentient body, Christ, that body's ego, suffers agonies as the nails are driven in, and in this condition gives up his life. So, from the whole reading, we come to understand that the resurrection of Christ is used here to show the path to all of us. And the true significance, this, if I remember right, is a dialogue which is initiated by Chadwick, I think, in the talks, or some reference to Chadwick is there before this talk or in the talk. That is how Bhagavan gives the significance of the resurrection of the Christ. That is the happening that he was crucified on the Good Friday, and the Easter Sunday, the 3 days later, he is supposed to have resurrected. But that whole process, in whatever way, historically or mythologically, it is significant, it is made into the truth of each one of us, that each one of us can practice this, and that is what we are practicing in Atma Vichara. And Bhagavan gives the reference that this body, the kshetram, in which we sow the good and the bad seeds, and for which we experience the good and the bad fruits, as Sri Krishna says, and Bhagavan takes for Bhagavad Gita Saram, the kshetram and the kshetrajna. The kshetrajna is referred to as the Christ. The kshetram is the cross, the body. It is the cross in which we are crucified, the good and the bad karmas. And both these good and bad karmas are overcome by tapas, by performance of austerities. So, in the face of terrible ordeals, says Muruganar Swami, because the happenings in the world are real to the outward turned jiva. So, really there is loss of fame, loss of this, loss of finance, loss of this and loss of that, and innumerable pains caused to the body in different ways. All these are suffered, but without austerity and seeking further happiness within inverted commas in the same plane of kshetram. Whereas the teaching is that the kshetrajna and kshetram, one should know the difference between the two, the discrimination between the two, and the kshetrajna should purify himself by tapas, so that he joins that kshetrajna who is the singular kshetrajna in all the kshetrams, the self. That is the import of the teachings in Bhagavad Gita Saram given by Bhagavan, that one should understand that if you continue to use the body for experiencing the happiness, then that is mere pleasure which will alternate with pain, and phalamashashvatam gati nirodhakam, that will go on endlessly in the karma sagara. Whereas when one gets the Guru Upadesham and starts the spiritual journey by discrimination between the cross and the Christ. The cross is the kshetram, the body, which is the field in which good and bad actions are sown, and the phala, the good and bad phala, are experienced. And the jiva comes to a point where this rented house, one is totally tired of. That this is there as a rented house and it goes away after some time, and then we are given another rented house in which we again sow and ignorantly look for pleasures and happiness to fulfill us. And they are all ashashvata phala. So one comes with Guru Upadesha to the Atma Jnana, the penance, the ultimate penance, Mahadidam Tapo Ramanavagiyam, that is Ahamapetakam Nijavibhanakam, Mahadidam Tapo Ramanavagiyam, out of all the austerities, to separate the Christ from the cross and to merge the Christ with the Father, the highest tapas, Bhagavan says, is Atma Vicharam, Mahadidam Tapo, where the ego is completely destroyed and the self alone shines, where the Christ is merged into the Father and the Father and I are one is the reality. That is the second sentence. That which remains is the self. When with austerity of Karma Yoga and Bhakti and Jnana, especially the acme of Jnana, the Atma Vicharam, which Bhagavan has given us, when we practice that tapas, which Muruganar Swami says, is like driving nails into our own body by ourselves. Because there are ordeals there. Somebody says, go and do this, you will get fame. Go and do that, you will be recognized as a better person in society. Why don't you do this and that? And that person is better, this person is better. And we have played that game enough to come to Atma Vicharam, to understand that all the problems lie in the Chitjadat Granthi. The Granthi formed by consciousness out of ignorance with this body, as this body I am. That is the Christ. And by God's grace, by the grace of the self, that Christ who was seeking pleasure through the body learns that that is merely a cross, a burden we are carrying. Bhagavan says the jnani will be waiting for the boss to say, keep down that burden and come. But he won't himself want, I should get rid of this burden. That will not be there. But Bhagavan says there will always be the knowledge that this is the cross I am carrying, this is the burden I am carrying, and the constant penance. In the case of jnani, it is natural. The penance is natural. The tapas is natural. There is no effort. Tapas is going on automatically. But when the Christ in the jiva does this penance of Atma Vicharam, then the Kshetrajna separates himself, detaches himself from the Kshetram of Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya Kosha. And when the Anandamaya Kosha is also transcended, when the ego is transcended, then my father and I, the Spurana and I are one. I am in Sayujya Padavi with Spurana. I am in merger and oneness with the Spurana, the I, the unbroken, continuous father of all. The Spurana which is running everything, which is the power which is connecting and running everything, and which can stand alone, which can remain detached from all of creation. That Spurana is I. My father and I are one. That which remains is the self, the permanently abiding reality, free from misery of birth and death. The birth and death are there only when the Triputi is there. That the seer, the Kshetrajna, holding a body and seeking pleasures in the world is there, then birth and death is there. When this game is understood for what it is, and one is turned inward with Guru Upadesham, then the game is over. The game of birth and death is over. As Natanananda Swami will ask Bhagavan, if Prarabdha, if Ishvara has determined when and what will happen to me and to everyone else, then how can I do self-inquiry whenever I want? Bhagavan says, the Prarabdha applies only to the outward turned mind. For the mind that is inward turned and seeking the Father, the Spurana, there is no Prarabdha that will come in the way. That which is beyond the Prarabdha, that which is the source of Prarabdha, is the sort. So that which is the instrument of the source cannot come in the way when we are seeking the source. What remains is the self, the permanently abiding reality, free from the misery of birth and death. This realization of the self, shining wholly as God, aham, 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 I am. Be still and know that you are God. That stillness of consciousness is the Father. The moving is the Jiva. When the Jiva with Guru Upadesham asks, who am I? And stills itself, then it is experiencing the source. When it is naturally still, freed of all vasanas, then it realizes the truth that God alone is, the Spurana alone is, the aham, shining wholly as God, is Christ's redemption and resurrection. One may have doubts and may look at many information whether the Christ's events in history really happened or not. But when Bhagavan says these things, they are real, they are there. They become the reality and sadhana for each of us. It is not that Christ was somewhere there and he merged with God and taught for some years and then dropped the body and went and got resurrected. There is the story of doubting Thomas, who says that even during the last days, they are all told, the disciples who are to spread the teachings are told, I will be there with you till end of time. The jnani who has transcended time can give that assurance. I will be there with you till end of time. Don't worry, go and spread my teachings is the instructions. But the Thomas says, unless I see that he is really resurrected and available, I will not do this. And that night it is said in the stories that Jesus appears and reveals himself and says, touch and see me. And then he believes. And the instruction to him is, those who see and believe are all right, but those who do not see and yet believe, they are really the true believers. That means the act of seeing has to be merged in being. Those who see and believe are there, no doubt. But finally, even when the seeing is completely burned in tapas, the being, that Father and I are one, this Purana alone is shining self-luminously, is real seeing, which is being that, being one with God, says Bhagavan here, giving validity to something that we find in the books, that it is true for each one of us, that this resurrection is not somewhere there. It is for each one of us to free ourselves of the cross with penance and merge with Arunachala Shiva, who is ever shining as I. With Bhagavan's immense grace, which has brought us to this sadhana, to this Mahad Idam Tapo, let us practice Atma Ucharam for 10 minutes. Revathi, will set the time for us. Namo Ramana. We continue the satsang by taking the second verse, verse number 675. This appears in the second segment, meditation on the truth. Meditation on the truth. The subsegment is freedom from vasanas, that is, mental habits and tendencies. Vasanas are told to be mental habits and tendencies. Habits indicating that we have got our consciousness surrendered to that and a slave of that, and tendencies indicate that those are directions in which we are led by these vasanas, that they pull the consciousness of the jiva in various directions. Verse number 675, freedom from vasanas. You should go beyond meditating at specific periods of the day and continuously practice self-abidance at all times. You should go beyond meditating at specific periods of the day and continuously practice self-abidance at all times. This shaving of the hairs, which are the itching vasanas, so that they do not sprout as thoughts through the brain, is the excellent and true shaving of the head that is prescribed for sannyasins. Bhagavan, how wonderful it is that you have shaved my head clean, O Arunachala, and are now dancing a joyous dance in the heart's vast empty space. Mottayadittane vettaveliyalli nattamadinayan Arunachala. In his commentary on this Aksharamanamala verse, Muruganar clearly equated the shaving of the head with destruction of vasanas, vasanakshayam. That is the verse. You should go beyond meditating at specific periods of the day and continuously practice self-abidance at all times. There was an interesting reading this morning by Venkatesh ji, where there is a small discussion, talk number 337. How is the mind to be purified? Bhagavan, this is a question by KRV Iyer. How is the mind to be purified? Bhagavan, the Shastras say by karma, bhakti and so on. Bhagavan says, he doesn't stop there. He says, my attendant, Bhagavan's attendant, asked the same question once before. The attendant has asked Bhagavan, how is the mind to be purified? He was told by Bhagavan, by karma dedicated to God, it is not enough that one thinks of God while doing the karma, but one must continuously and unceasingly think of God. Then alone will the mind become pure. The attendant applies it to himself and says, it is not enough that I serve Sri Bhagavan physically, but I must unceasingly remember him. That is the beauty of continuous tapas, says Bhagavan, that the Atma Vichara should go on continuously. How is that to be affected? The instructions to the attendant is what is so enlightening for us, that when we are involved in the physical engagement in the world, since the world of Ashtamurti is all only Bhagavan, when we are in physical seva, we are in physical service of Bhagavan only. Just like the attendant was serving Bhagavan, whenever we are in physical work in this world, we are physically serving Bhagavan. But Bhagavan says that is not enough. When we are physically involved, when I am speaking, that speaking is not enough. There should be a constant remembrance. The mind should be engaged in remembering Bhagavan. So the Karma Yoga should be along with the bhakti, the continuous remembrance. In various ways, we can start remembering Him, and it becomes so easy when we see how miraculously the things are connected and how insignificant we are, how insignificant the ego is. Then remembering God becomes natural because there is nothing but that infinite connection which allows you to do the physical seva. If I remember that just this English has been arranged by Bhagavan over hundreds of thousands of years, with the physiological evolution taking place, the changes in the brain and the connections in the mind all coming together, and I am using as though it is mine. But the moment I remember that so much has been arranged for this insignificant ego to do this, then remembrance of Bhagavan becomes constant. And that is how Bhagavan says here, you should go beyond meditating at specific periods of time of the day and continuously practice self-abidance at all times. How much has self-connected everything for the physical activity, for the mental activity, for the Atma Vichara to take place, then automatically remembrance of that Adikaranam is there. And that becomes self-inquiry is automatic. When in Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, Bhagavan clarifies that just pressing his leg or bringing him some food is not enough. It should be accompanied by continuous thought. The mind, ஒன்றே சொல்வான் ஒன்றே செய்வான் உள்ளத்தில் இருப்பது அமைதி. That means the Paramatma, the Jiva, the Koshas, all should be integrated when the hand comes and serves in the world. How is that to happen? How can it be a singular thing? Only if the remembrance, the connection with the source is always ever present and natural. That is why Bhagavan says, begin self-inquiry with 10 minutes, with some specific periods of time, but then in your own way, reading Bhagavan, remembering him, thinking how karma and bhakti brings you to self-inquiry and how God is always there, the self is always there, then remembrance becomes automatic. Self-inquiry, self-attention becomes automatic and not restricted to particular time. When time itself has to be transcended, where is the point in just saying, I meditate for 10 minutes a day or 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day? No, the Atmanishtata should be natural and should be beyond time and space. The time and space reference of 10 minutes in the alarm clock is only to begin the sadhana. Then we should meditate on the grace of the self and the self itself, that it becomes natural. There is nothing else to think. What can the individual connect? What kind of thoughts can the individual, how much information is there? The database is highly insignificant. Everything is in the self, and that arrangement is what allows this insignificant play also to be played. So whenever we are part of this small role that we play, we can always remember how the self has connected infinitely all the things and also transcended them. That helps us to remember the self always, to be inverted. You should go beyond meditating at specific periods of time of the day and continuously practice self-abidance at all times. This shaving of hairs, which are the itching vasanas, so that they do not sprout. So the sannyasins have this practice of completely removing all the hairs. There was this incident of in our tradition that some ladies have to remove the hair some hundreds of years ago, and some many years ago, one of the Matadhipadis who was in that time would not look at the people who have not shaved their hair, having lost their husband. And one lady sends the note that I thought that abiding in the self is real shaving of hair, and you are still insisting on removing of this physical hair. Then that Matadhipati asks that lady to come and have the discussion with him. And that is the truth, that the symbolic removal of hair, Bhagavan used to remove all his hair every Paurnami. And many of our people in Ramanashram do that so that that is a reminder for self-inquiry. But if I understand the significance of it, then I practice the significance that I may not, fortunately, I don't have a need to remove that. It is already very little, but we did not go through the physical act, but what it symbolizes, if we can carry out, that is destruction of vasanas, vasana kshaya. When the vasana pushes the thought in one direction or the other, and the thought rises and says, how enticing I am, go in this direction, go in that direction. The Christ should say, no, I am doing penance, I am not going to follow you. For whom is this thought? To me, the Christ. Who am I? I go and meet my Father there, who is ever present and waiting self-luminously. And that is the Mahadidam Tapo, that the Jiva refuses to follow the direction in which the Vasana is pushing or pulling, and turns inward to the source, and thereby destroys that habit, destroys that tendency at least once, and repeated destruction of that becomes, the tendency becomes completely annihilated. And when all the tendencies are annihilated, then that person is the real sannyasi, whether with a shaven head or not. Then that sannyasatva, the complete freedom from all directions, all conditionings, is there, and one is abiding in the oneness with Father. As Bhagavan would say in the letters from Ramanacentre, it begins, the letters, the first letter itself, it is sometime during Kartika Deepam time, where Arunachala goes in Pradakshana around, and when in front of the ashram, they would do Harati for Arunachala, and at that time Bhagavan would be in that Ilupai tree. He'll be sitting by a tap, I suppose, near the Ilupai tree, and the person doing the Harati will bring the Harati to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan is supposed to say in the letters that Appakul Pillai Adakam, and take the Harati. Appakul, inside the Father, the Son is beholden, is merged. There was a assistant librarian by name Ramesh, and he and I would discuss certain things in the morning, because he would come to the library before time, and after breakfast he will be available. And he felt that it must be that the person who was doing Harati wanted to show Harati like this to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan stopped him and said, no, don't show that to me, it is not required. Inside Father, I am there. Appakul Pillai Adakkam. That Adakkam in the self. Adangi irundal engum irukala. If one is completely subsided into the self, then you can be anywhere. Yeah. That is a statement which is superfluous, because anywhere and every time he is inside that, he is inside the Father, and one is safe when merged in the Father. And that sannyasatva need not be by removing the hair, but it is natural, and all the vasanas stay destroyed. And with Bhagavan's grace, one is merged in Bhagavan in Sayujya Sthiti, one is the self-luminous self. There is nothing other than oneself to see or to reveal oneself to. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in Atma Ucharan for 10 minutes. Revathi, you will set the time for us. Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramananjali. Namo Ramana. I request our President, Sharadaka, to give us the summing up remarks. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. The continuity, the satatam, is stressed by Bhagavan repeatedly. It is the Upadesha Saram, it is Ajyadharya Srotasasamam. In Appadapattu, he says Santatam Salippara Santoshamagave. And all the devotees of Bhagavan, it is to NRK Krishnamurti Iyer, he said that the mantra should go on continuously like the Sudarshana Chakra. To Vishwanatha Swami, he has said to do all the time. And Vishwanatha Swami also told me this. He said, give all your time. He didn't say that sweetly. He said, give all your spare time to meditation. Give all your spare time to the dhyana, to the self-inquiry, to watching the source, to looking at the source of the mantra, to looking at the source, to asking, who am I, whenever possible, all the spare time. And this is what Bhagavan emphasizes. In fact, any sadhana which one may do, he says, let it be santatam, let it be ajyadhara, let it be continuous, unbroken. Of course, initially the sadhana will be broken, but with more and more love for the sadhana, it will become intermittent, and then it will become unbroken, and then the sadhana itself will disappear. As Nanda Kumarji said, that there will be nobody to see and believe. No more will there be a person to do the sadhana for it to be continuous. But Bhagavan says that one abiding in the self. He says in Ramana Gita that one abiding in the self is performing the greatest tapas continuously. In Upadesha Saram also Bhagavan says, Mahadidam tapo. So that it becomes the greatest penance to abide in the self. Now, the penance itself, it is in a way a suffering. The tapas, the word tapas means heat, tapana. It means heat, to undergo the heat, to undergo the fire, to undergo that, the trigger of practice, to make that effort is called tapas. And at all times, in fact, the beauty of its being at all times, we find in the story of Prahlada, when that young child is put through so many sufferings actually by his very own father, Hiranyakashipu, he puts him through all kinds of torture. But what happens is that this young child holding on only to the Narayana Nama continuously through everything is actually unaware of the suffering. There is suffering for the beholder, as Bhagavan says, but no suffering for that individual who is soaked in the self, who is soaked in the Lord. Similarly, Dr. Kalarani had once quoted that Manika Vachakar was put into the burning brick kiln as torture. And at that time, he composed a poem, a song on Shiva, saying how wonderful it is, how cool it is. And there is a cool lake by my side, and the breeze is wafting, birds are singing songs beautifully. So he was in that joy regardless of even the suffering. Bhagavan himself says in Padigam, he says, குறையும் குணமும் நீ அல்லால் என்னே நிவற்றை என்னுயிரே எண்ணம் எதுவோ அது செய்வாய். Says you are the good, you are the bad, you are everything for me. Then when you are the good and you are the bad, how to distinguish between the two? How to distinguish? If everyone has the same face, how to distinguish between one and the other? Actually, in our center, there are two brothers who looked very similar, who were serving the center. They used to drive the car, they used to come home, and one was quite familiar with our neighbor's young child, 3 or 4 years old at that time, young girl, and she was used to speaking to him in the mornings. But on one day, the other brother, elder brother, had come, and she was nonplussed as to why he was not so familiarly speaking with her. At that time, the younger brother also came, and she said, in Kannada, she said, "Neevibru onde mukha itkondidira, onde tale itkondidira. You both are having the same head," she said. You know, so she said, "I cannot make out which of you it is." Similarly, Bhagavan says, if everything is Arunachala, how to say something is suffering and how to say something specifically is pleasurable? So that is the sadhana. The sadhana is to make it continuous so that all distinctions fade away. The mind itself fades away when a sadhana becomes continuous, because it's the nature of the mind to move, to change from one to the other. When this change stops due to santatam salipara, due to the continuous holding on of the single thought of the ekachintana, when the change ceases, the mind also ceases and it merges in its source. So Bhagavan asks us to hold on. And as I said, Vishwanatha Swami told me to give all spare time, because he said, okay, whatever duty is cast upon you by Bhagavan, complete that duty and give the spare time to meditation. When one starts the habit of even attending to the self or attending to the mantra, to the source of the mantra, to the source, attending to self-inquiry, whenever one feels there is a gap, whenever one feels there is time, if one starts by paying attention, gradually one will begin to realize that almost every moment is spare time. What is the great thing that one is doing? All work is being done by the Lord. Then where is any work for me to do? So all time becomes spare time, and then we can abide in the self continuously by His abundant grace. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramana.
Namo Ramanaka. May I request Vaibhavji and Pratnama to chant?
नमो रमण भारद्वाज विश्वनाथ विरचितं श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तर शतनामावलिः अपार सच्चित् सुखवारिराशे यस्योर्मिमात्रं भुवनं समस्तं गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि। ॐ महासेन महंसेन जाताय नमः। ॐ श्रीरमणाय नमः। ॐ गुरवे नमः। ॐ अखण्डसंविदाकाराय नमः। ॐ महौजसे नमः। ॐ कारणोद्भवाय नमः। ॐ जगद्धितावताराय नमः। ॐ श्रीभूमिनाथस्थलोस्थिताय नमः। ॐ पराशरकुलोत्तंसाय नमः। ॐ सुन्दरार्यतपःफलाय नमः। ॐ कमनीयसुचारित्राय नमः। ॐ सहायांबा सहायवते नमः। ॐ शोणाचलमहोलीनमानसाय नमः। ॐ स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमः। ॐ श्रीमद्द्वादशान्तमहास्थले लब्धविद्योदयाय नमः। ॐ महाशक्तिनिपातेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः। ॐ परमार्थविदे नमः। ॐ तीव्राय नमः। ॐ पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः। ॐ इन्दुमौलिना पितृमते नमः। ॐ पितुरादेशतः षोडशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः। ॐ तपोमयाय नमः। ॐ उदासीनाय नमः। ॐ महायोगिने नमः। ॐ महोत्साहाय नमः। ॐ कुशाग्रदिये नमः। ॐ शान्तसङ्कल्पसंरम्भाय नमः। ॐ सुसन्दशे नमः। ॐ सवित्रे नमः। ॐ स्थिराय नमः। ॐ तपःक्षपितसर्वाङ्गाय नमः। ॐ फुल्लाम्बुजविलोचनाय नमः। ॐ चन्द्रिकासितहासश्रीमण्डिताननमण्डलाय नमः। ॐ च्यूतवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः। ॐ चूर्णिताखिलविभ्रमाय नमः। ॐ वेदवेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञाय नमः। ॐ चिन्मुद्रिणे नमः। ॐ त्रिगुणातिगाय नमः। ॐ विरूपाक्षगुहावासाय नमः। ॐ विराजतचलाकृतये नमः। ॐ उद्दीप्तनयनाय नमः। ॐ पूर्णाय नमः। ॐ रचिताचलताण्डवाय नमः। ॐ गम्भीराय नमः। ॐ परमाचार्याय नमः। ॐ सुप्रसन्नाय नमः। ॐ अभयप्रदाय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणास्त्यनिभाय नमः। ॐ धीराय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः। ॐ स्वराजे नमः। ॐ महर्षये नमः। ॐ भगवते नमः। ॐ ईड्याय नमः। ॐ भूमविद्याविशारदाय नमः। ॐ विमलाय नमः। ॐ दीर्घदर्शिने नमः। ॐ आप्ताय नमः। ॐ ऋजुमार्गप्रदर्शकाय नमः। ॐ समदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्यदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्याय नमः। ॐ प्रशान्ताय नमः। ॐ अमितविक्रमाय नमः। ॐ सुकुमाराय नमः। ॐ सदानन्दाय नमः। ॐ मृदुभाषिणे नमः। ॐ दयार्णवाय नमः। ॐ श्रीशोणाचलहृद्बोधस्कन्दाश्रमनिकेतनाय नमः। ॐ सद्दर्शनोपदेष्ट्रे नमः। ॐ सद्भक्तवृन्दपरिवृताय नमः। ॐ गणेशमुनिभृङ्गेन सेविताङ्घ्रिसरोरुहाय नमः। ॐ गीतोपदेशसारादिग्रन्थसञ्चिन्न संशयाय नमः। ॐ वर्णाश्रममतातीताय नमः। ॐ रसज्ञाय नमः। ॐ सौम्याय नमः। ॐ आत्मवते नमः। ॐ सर्वावनिमतस्थानाम् आराध्याय नमः। ॐ सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः। ॐ आत्मारामाय नमः। ॐ महाभागाय नमः। ॐ मातृमुक्तिविधायकाय नमः। ॐ विनताय नमः। ॐ वियुताय नमः। ॐ विप्राय नमः। ॐ मुनीन्द्राय नमः। ॐ पावकोज्ज्वलाय नमः। ॐ दर्शनादगसंहारिणे नमः। ॐ मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः। ॐ ऋक्षान्तिकरसान्निध्याय नमः। ॐ स्मरणाद्बन्धमोचकाय नमः। ॐ अन्तस्तिमिरचण्डांशवे नमः। ॐ संसारार्णवतारकाय नमः। ॐ शोणादृशस्तुतिद्रष्टे नमः। ॐ हार्दविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः। ॐ अविच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः। ॐ नैसर्गिकमहातपसे नमः। ॐ कमण्डलुदराय नमः। ॐ शूद्रकौपीनवसनाय नमः। ॐ गुहाय नमः। ॐ दण्डपाणये नमः। ॐ कृपापूर्णाय नमः। ॐ भवरोगविषग्वराय नमः। ॐ स्कन्दाय नमः। ॐ देवतमाय नमः। ॐ अमर्त्याय नमः। ॐ सेनान्ये नमः। ॐ पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ॐ श्रीरमण भगवते नमः। श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तरशतनाम पूजां समर्पयामि। यस्थानोररुणाचलस्य पदयोः स्मृत्याजलिं प्राप्यत दिव्यानुग्रहसुप्रवाहविवश तादात्म्यभावं गतः त्रिनिष्ठस्वगभीरनित्यतपसा लोकान् पुनासेकराट् तस्मै श्रीरमणाय ते नम इदं लोकोत्तरज्योतिषे। ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय।
नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि। नमो महर्षि दर्शन सुख मंगल मुख सकल जीवहित सम्मुख ब्रह्म संगिये सदा तुष्ट सदा हृष्ट सदा शिवानंद पुष्ट परम महर्षि ब्रह्मनिष्ठ समदर्शि नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि। नमो महर्षि ನಮ್ಮ ಮನವದೊಂದು ಕಾಡು ನೀನರಿತಿಹೆ ಅದರ ಜಾಡು ಹಿತವನರಿತು ನೀಡುತ್ತೆಮ್ಮ ಕೊರೆಯ ತಣಿಸಲೈ ಬೇಡಲೆಂದು ಬಂದ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿಯೇ ತಣಿವೆವಯ್ಯ ಮೋಡಿಗಾರನೇ ಹಿತವ ನುಡಿದು ಪೊರೆ ನಮ್ಮನು ಬ್ರಹ್ಮ ಸಂಘಿಯೇ ನಮೋ 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 ರಮಣ ಸದಾಶಿವ ಪ್ರಭಾವರಣ ನಮೋ महर्षि। नमो महर्षि। बोलो भगवान श्री रमण महर्षि की
जय। नमो रमण अक्का, ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮೋ ರಮಣ।